Cuthbert from Timber Creek Counseling, and we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence at work and home. How are you guys doing today?
We are doing well.
Yeah, doing very well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
I thought for starts, we could just have you guys tell everybody a little bit about Timber Creek Counseling and what you guys do in the community.
Yeah, so we started Timber Creek Counseling in 2018. That's when Andrew graduated from his program in clinical psychology. And we really wanted to create a space that provided high quality counseling and assessment services, but was also just known for being involved in the community in however ways that we can help. So yeah, we have grown since then. We have 2 full-time clinicians and a part-time clinician, and yeah, it's been a great couple of years.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I was going to add, so essentially we give counseling services from 5 years old to 120 years old, and do a lot of couples work, a lot of work with children, teenagers, adults, and also do psychological assessments, which I won't get way into. People sometimes get confused about what exactly those are, but if people are ever wondering about things like diagnosing ADHD or learning disorders, or just trying to figure out exactly what's going on sometimes as part of the picture, then that's something that I do with psychological assessments, and then often also just meeting people where they're at. And so a lot of times people aren't quite sure what they're needing, but they're thinking counseling or just having somebody come along as part of the picture. So that's a big part of what we do. And then right now, as you can imagine, we are not in person, so we are doing lots of video sessions, and actually have found that that's gone pretty well. And so people can still get some sessions, particularly since we have an awesome new clinician that just started recently. So we are able to have a little bit more openings here for a little bit.
That's great. Yeah, it's been weird to have to adjust. We're all having to adjust, as you can see right here, doing these versus our normal business after hours or something. Where are you guys located at?
We are in the Middle Street Professional Building, right next to the fire station.
Nice. Okay, great. That's awesome. You set up to 120. I'm curious, just for fun. I'm assuming you haven't had an actual 120.
No.
All right.
Yeah, we do. We're even, so we take a few different insurance companies too, but one of the things we've been doing recently is particularly paneling with some insurance companies that older adults tend to have too. And so that's,
care.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about emotional intelligence at work and home. What do you want to share with the people? Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to Andrew before we started this, and I was like, what we need to do is we need to explain why it's important before we even get into anything. So, I think emotional intelligence has kind of been like a hip phrase that's come around in recent years. And, I am not the psychologist in the family, that's Andrew, but I have been working for just over a decade. And to me, I found emotional intelligence to be really important when developing my leadership skills within the workforce. And so I think if you're like, oh, is this something I would want to look into, learn more about? I think it makes people better leaders. I think it helps them in their relationships with coworkers, managers, employees, family, and friends. So really, I think it is important for us to talk about. And Andrew will get more into the specifics of, some things that you can do to help raise your emotional intelligence. But yeah, it's an important skill to have.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, and like you said, it walks across all genres of job and things like that. I mean, no matter what you're doing, you don't need to be in counseling to understand the importance of that for sure. Andrew, why don't you lay down some details for us?
Yeah. So one thing I think is that I encounter a lot of people that aren't even quite sure what to do with emotions. And so one starting point is even just being able to pause and understand what emotions are and how to deal with them, because they can be either that really loud voice that just kind of takes over things, or, other people are completely ignoring them. And so it's hard to just know how emotions factor into things. And so I think the the first case that I have is that it's okay for emotions to be a part of the picture, for feelings to be a part of the picture. And, you know, I encounter a lot of different people that interact very differently with feelings and emotions. And part of mine is just saying, like, it's okay for them to be a part of the picture, but what I'm not going to do is push for them to take over the whole picture and just sort of run the whole show too.
Yeah, that makes sense completely. I mean, yeah. Please continue.
Feel free to jump in with anything. So one of the things that I think about is that sort of if you imagine we're sitting down at a meal all together for a second, and you know there's 6 chairs around the table at the meal, and you got different people sitting in each chair. I sort of use this table analogy to almost imagine what might be sitting at the table for each of us. And so we might have a whole bunch of thoughts going on in our mind. That's got a chair. Circumstances of a day that's going on. Maybe this is emotional intelligence at home, and you just had a stressful day at work, and you're sitting, you know, down, and just maybe even your background's in there. And also in there, for sure, though, is going to be emotions, right? That's going to have one of the seats at the table. And part of how I look at emotions, at times I might like turn towards emotions, acknowledge that they have a seat at the table. Sometimes listen to them, sometimes look right over at that seat and say, hey, what are you trying to tell me? There's clearly something important that's going on here.
Right.
But also, like, that emotion isn't a fact of life either. And so I'm taking it into context, I'm factoring it in, but I'm still churning and acting, hopefully according to my values and who I want to be, while understanding that emotions are part of the input, but they're not the full picture too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, in my mind, it makes sense that like they technically have no effect unless you allow them to have an effect, right? I mean, they affect how you feel about it, but they don't affect your actions unless you allow them to. And I feel like that's kind of what you're getting at with that analogy, right? I mean, it's important to recognize them, to see them, but they don't have to dictate how you treat people around you or what you're doing with your day. They just are what they are. You know?
Like to kind of speak to that, sometimes I'll use this silly analogy of like, man, I'm feeling so tired. I feel so tired. I can't get up from this chair. I feel so tired. I feel so tired. I feel like, but I can still get up from the chair, right? Even if I'm feeling completely exhausted. Now, maybe I need to listen to it for a second and say, man, I've been really going hard. Maybe I should actually slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe my emotions are telling me something really important. And so it really is trying to figure out how to live wisely. One analogy that a lot of people may have heard of, and this comes from a type of therapy, but they'll talk about there being wise mind, and then on both sides of the wise mind are our kind of rational brain and our emotional brain. And we can go really far into the rational side, sort of like Spock from Star Trek, and we're just trying to make every decision with 100% rational thinking. Yeah, exactly, logic. And then on the other side, this like completely emotional person that's just dictated by the ups and down flows of life. And what we're saying is you need both. What's that?
Captain Kirk.
Captain Kirk, exactly.
Yeah. See, now you're talking about language. We get into the sci-fi, and then I'm really dive in. It's good, yeah.
That's right. So it's hard to be able to factor them both in, but what we're saying is that both are an important part of the picture. So the rational person isn't the perfect person that knows it all. The emotional person who's just completely in their emotion, there's a difference when you can get into that sort of wise space. And essentially that's what we're thinking of when it comes to emotional intelligence, is how can you live really wisely into your life, and then live according to the values that you have in the middle of that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I really like the analogy of the table in general with the 6 different people, and that, you know, represents the different aspects of what you're feeling from moment to moment. I do think it was something you mentioned in that analogy about, you know, who knows what kind of day people have had too. I think a lot of times it's very easy to judge somebody on an interaction you have with them, but you're not seeing their table, right? You don't know what all their chairs are right now. You don't know what their day was like at work. You don't know what their day was like at home. And God knows we all don't always say the right thing at the right time to the right person. And a lot of times that's based on stuff that they don't see. So I think it is important to remember that everybody's got 6 chairs. You know, it's not just your interaction with them. It's everything they're dealing with. And now all of a sudden, you know, you might be getting the blunt end of something that they're not trying to make you deal with, and you shouldn't have to, but that's life. You know, we all got stuff. You don't know what's going on in people's lives.
That's really well said. It's hard to pause and remember that, but I think that's such an important thing that you're to be able to see
especially right now.
Yeah. And I would just say from like a workplace perspective. So, I work in accounting, and often I have to be that person to come down with the accounting rules and say, hey, we can't do it this way, or we need to change this whole process that you put together because it's, against what the IRS has. And
right.
So sometimes those conversations can be difficult. And if a person, like, again, I don't know their table, I don't know what their day's been like, or if this is the fifth thing they've been told they need to change in the day. So just being able to acknowledge that a person could be in a different space than me, and it's not necessarily my actions that might be causing it. And just being able to respond in a way that's calm, like to be able to acknowledge, like, oh, if they didn't respond well to me, I can't control that, but I can at least control how I respond back to them.
Right.
And, trying to not take it personally.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes perfect sense. And Andrew, you must run into that literally all the time, right? I mean, you're helping people deal with things. I imagine a ton of people don't come to you saying, everything in my life is perfect. Everything's great. I'm loving it, but I just thought I'd come talk to you for fun. I'm assuming that's not how it originally starts. And therefore, you're consistently probably getting an attitude or an emotion from these people that isn't really directed at you, but is literally your job to help them figure out. And so that's got to be difficult. I mean, I can't even imagine having to consistently kind of I don't want to say swallow your pride, but, step back from that aggression that you maybe get, or maybe I'm way off in this. Obviously, I don't have the expertise you do in that.
No, I absolutely hear what you're saying, because one of the most important parts, I think, of being able to have a counseling relationship, and you can get these relationships outside of counseling too, but having somebody who can be a container for all the different crazy thoughts you have going on in your head, like the weird emotions that are coming up, but being able to sort of take the filter off of all those thoughts and feelings that you have going on, and be able to just sort of let it out to a certain, like, to be yourself and to really express those things, and know that the person is not going to be like, whoa, that was too much, or like, now I know that you're like, that was too far. But like, we all have those. Like, often people wonder if they're crazy, or if it's like, man, am I really bad because I have to go to counseling? But no, we all have thoughts and feelings that are all over the place. And it's important to have this relationship where every once in a while you don't have to worry about the other person, but they can kind of be the container for those thoughts and feel. And really, I mean, this is extending to just how we approach things at Timber Creek Counseling, but we really just want to approach people with a lot of compassion, where we say, like, hey, this space is for you. We're here to walk alongside you. And it's probably just incredibly courageous that you showed up at our door and are willing to walk alongside it with somebody. I think that takes a lot more courage than just trying to deal with all of your problems yourself, as if you're completely self-able.
I completely. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, it's very easy to tell yourself, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong if you never talk to anybody about it. You just keep swallowing it. But I don't think anybody thinks that's overly healthy. Some of us obviously are lucky, and maybe just having that loved one or that close friend can be enough of that. You got those long-term relationships and people that, on a bad day, maybe you don't have to consider their feelings as much. You can really go to them and be like, I got to unload on you. You know what I mean? But some people don't have that, and some people maybe don't want to put that on their friends or their family. That makes perfect sense. Yeah,
that's even a good way of, sometimes people are trying to decide if counseling is appropriate. I'm trying to get people done with counseling, not because I don't want to meet with them, but because I want them to be able to function in in their world well. But to be able to know that, like, if thoughts or feelings feel like, I just don't want to, like you said, dump this on a particular person, or they feel like too complex, and like the factors that are going on, like, I just feel like I need a professional to go to talk about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is, and there have been times where I've said, I really don't think that at this moment counseling is the most appropriate thing, because you have these people in your life and you're not sharing with them. So maybe it is that you go with them. And so then counseling is actually just helping facilitate those relationships happen. So, that's a good point.
That's a great approach to take at it. I mean, I think that anybody that's listening or watches this or gets a chance to talk with you guys in some other platform will really respect that type of mentality where it's not about you, trying to convince people that everybody needs this, everybody needs my services, I'm the answer to everything, but more of that. Does this make sense for you? Do you need this avenue? And as you said, maybe even just meeting once or twice to help them put certain things in perspective, engage those other avenues they have for those emotions. That's fantastic. That's such a refreshing way to look at somebody running a business. Even if it wasn't counseling, it could be selling a car. You know what I mean? It's truly the best salesman, in my opinion. And I did sell stuff for a very long time, are never trying to sell you what you don't need. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. So,
and thankfully here in Chelsea, in the community and other businesses, and like often some of my favorite phone calls are when I'm like, somebody's just like, hey, I'm not sure what to do. Here's what's going on. And I'm saying, yeah, what you're describing, I could maybe help with, but here's this other person that would be much better at that. Or, here's this other thing. And I think that's one thing that I, always hope that people feel open to, like, making phone calls or reaching out for help. And hopefully the answer is not going to just be like, yeah, I need to figure out how I can help you. But like I love when I can just figure out like what's going on. How can we point you in the right direction? And if we're a part of that, that could be a part of the healing process, but sometimes it isn't.
Yeah. That's great. Do you find that you've got somewhat of a network of other professionals and stuff that maybe do the same thing with you? Somebody comes to them and they realize that your services would be better fit for that person, and then they come to you instead. Yeah.
So even here in Chelsea, and definitely extending, there's lots of people in Ann Arbor as well, but there's some, great other practices and people here in Chelsea where we're often, given phone calls or just connecting people just to whoever seems like the best fit.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we think is really important, just making sure that people, have the best fit. And also you can always try it out. And if it's not the right fit, the nice thing that I'm always able to say is you're like, especially for people coming to counseling, you're the one who is like the consumer. You're the one figuring out, is this a good fit for me? So they're usually nervous, but I'm saying that actually, like, I'm the one here that you're kind of interviewing, and I feel like it's a good, safe fit where you can really work on things. Thankfully, you're not going to be out of options, right? There are other good people we can help connect you to those.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Hey, so I was curious to maybe end on a lighter note here. And you can just say that nobody's gotten it right, but I'm anxious. I watch tons of TV, Sopranos, all these things, and they all have these type of people in your profession. And I'm curious, in your opinion, has anybody ever gotten it right? Have you ever watched something and said, that reminds me of what it's really like when I'm sitting in that room? And if the answer is no, that's great. I'm just curious.
It's a good question.
I'm curious how you
I watched way too many movies and stuff.
Yeah.
There was I can't remember. I think it was an HBO documentary that was only, what is it? I think it's called In Practice, and it did not capture.
In Treatment.
What's that?
In Treatment?
In Treatment, yeah. There were moments of In Treatment, but that show also had parts that were definitely not at all. But there were moments in Treatment that might have been somewhat similar. Normally, there's like a stereotype, I think, of counseling, like any industry, that right now probably goes more to like the person laying on the couch telling them about their dreams, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like, this Facebook Live is probably closer to what counseling is like than any of those TV shows, because it's two people having a conversation. It's set up, of course, differently, but like, I think people are almost always surprised that it's much more comfortable and natural and like a thing that they've already done before. And it's familiar, like, oh, I've sort of had relationships like this before, but now it's to a whole nother level with confidentiality and other things. So you didn't know the answer was this Facebook Live is the answer.
Yeah, there we go. This Facebook Live. This is the closest we've seen on television. That's great. That's awesome. Is there anything you guys wanted to add before we go today?
I mean, I just appreciate the opportunity for us to come and talk with you. And we really enjoy being members of the chamber. As we were mentioning before the show, we found a lot of the people that we work with, like our accountant, our financial planners, our chiropractor through the chamber. So it's been a really, really great thing for us. I guess if people want to learn more about Timber Creek, I think we can put the website in the chat.
Yep, it's up there already. Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. We appreciate the chance to talk with you.
Yeah, on the website we have some COVID resources, since that's what's going on for coping, through this time. Definitely have openings if people are ever interested in both assessment and therapy, particularly Angela and Lynn, you'll see on our website, are the two other counselors, and both of them have openings at the time. And yeah, we really want to be a practice that is just in Chelsea caring for this community. We're constantly trying to, figure out what exactly that looks like to meet the needs of where they're at. So even if, somebody isn't looking for counseling and they're just saying, hey, I know there's these needs going on. That's one of the biggest things we're trying to do, is just understand, just walk alongside people and figure out what's going on. So, so this is cool just to be a part of this, because it feels like that sense of community for us.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the kind words about the chamber. And I can tell you my impression ever since I've been dealing with you guys from the minute I jumped into this position, that's the exact impression I got, is wanting to help the community. I know you reached out really quickly, and we put something out to the whole chamber, with your guys' offer to help anybody with anything. And I think that's just great. There's no way this community makes it through without everybody working together and everybody, putting in their 2 cents when they can. So I really appreciate you guys coming on today. And like I said, your website and links are in the comments. So if anybody needs additional information, don't hesitate to reach out. And I want to say thank you to Shasta Grifka for sponsoring today and facilitating, as always.
Yes.
And thank you.
Yes, thank you, Shasta. And thank you, Andrew and Melissa. And thank you, everybody at home. Bye.
Right. Thank you, guys.
Bye.